Hi, everybody, and welcome to Heel Heat. My name is George Coles, and on this episode, we're going to do It Came From the Network. The topic of this, ECW Season 1, Episode 1. This comes to us as a recommendation from our good friend Steve Tatanani. It's from April 6, 1993, just a year shy of 20 years ago at this point of recording, or 30 years ago. Wow, time really does fly. Interesting, before we get into this, it's marked as hardcore TV, but it wasn't called hardcore TV at the time. I know because I watched it at the time. And it's marked as ECW, but this is the Eastern Championship Wrestling run of ECW. Pre-Paul Heyman, Eddie Gilbert's the booker. This is a lot different show than what you would think from an ECW show. And again, I used to watch this back in the day, and I've seen this episode probably 15, 20 times. I think it's a neat time capsule, but we'll get into that. If you haven't seen my shows here before, I grade everything on a 1 to 5 scale, 1 being the worst, 5 being the best. Jumping right in, the first thing that we notice that's totally different from ECW that we know, there's no Joey Styles. The commentators are Stevie Wonderful and Jay Sully, and they're announced to have a guest commentator who first is teased to be Eddie Gilbert, being the main heel of the early ECW run. He's run off the scene by Terry Funk, who is actually the guest commentator on the show. These guys, they're not bad. They're not terrible at all. They're not as good as Joey Styles, but they were a good commentary team. I kind of, I feel like they could have been used more in the future, but I digress. The first match of the show is the Super Destroyers, and if you watched my other videos, I talked about another set of Super Destroyers that were in World Class Championship Wrestling. This is another set. There have been a few different teams of Super Destroyers, basically guys that you just threw under the mask. I want to say one of them was AJ Przewski, which I'm probably pronouncing way wrong. I forget who the other one was, but anywho, I digress. Super Destroyers is a gimmick that's been used in different territories all through wrestling in the last 50 years, I want to say now. You may even see them on independent shows now. They're going up against a team called the Hell Riders, Easy Rider, and HD Rider, which I believe HD Rider goes on to be Chubby Dudley. This was an okay match. It was basically a way to put over the Super Destroyers. The cool thing is they had one of my highlights of the early ECW run. Hunter Q. Robbins III is their manager. I thought Hunter Q. Robbins was a good manager. Yeah, he was a little bit in the 80s style of managing, but I thought he could have went further with what he did. The Super Destroyers pick up the win here. Afterwards, Terry Funk does a little interview with them, basically interviewing Hunter. I'm giving this match a 2. It was good, but nothing really special. Just what you would expect of wrestling of 1993. Next up, we get a promo package for the Sandman. And just like I said, this show is very, very different. The beer-swilling, cigarette-smoking, cane-carrying, Zubaz-wearing Sandman is not this character. This is the Surfer Sandman. And I know if you've been a long-time fan of wrestling, you've probably seen Surfer Sandman, especially if you were a fan of USWA at the time, which is actually, if you watch the footage on there, it's all USWA footage that they're using, which makes sense because Eddie Gilbert had ties to USWA, and I'm sure he was using a sharing of talent at the time. It's just funny seeing it with the stock music, because I guarantee, and I want I want to say I remember it playing when they would do stuff like this in the surfer run of Sandman. I know a lot of people say Surfer Sting, but Sandman was actually a surfer. He wrestled in a bodysuit. During that run, I want to say they used Wipeout on his packages or a Beach Boys-esque song. So it's funny hearing the stock music they put over it. I would have expected them to just cut it out altogether. They cut out a lot of the other music videos that ECW uses in different shows. But anyway, I digress. After that, we get our first match in what was announced at the beginning of the show by Todd Gording, a TV title tournament. We get a first round match, the Hitman Tommy Cairo versus Sal Balomo. Again, two guys, again, there were early mainstays in ECW. Tommy Cairo, another guy, I don't know why he didn't carry on once ECW made the change, because he absolutely was somebody that they built their company on. Sal Balomo was mostly known as an undercard talent on WWE, and this show is more indicative of what independent wrestling in 1993 in the Northeast looked like than a third viable wrestling program. At this point, I don't think they had any notion that they were going to try to go national. It was called Eastern Championship Wrestling. The championship belt had, I believe, if I remember right, it had a picture of Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and Delaware, which I think was all they were expecting to run. Again, this is a time capsule of independent wrestling at that time. The funny thing, Sal Balomo has the Cosmic Commander as a manager, who is a blatant ripoff of the Grand Wizard Ernie Roth. I mean, it's the same character. He has nowhere near the charisma or talent of Ernie Roth, but he's still in there. During the match, we see Johnny Hotbody run in. To him and Cairo were an early feud in the ECW, which, again, two of the guys that helped build ECW to where it became what it did. We end up seeing Tommy Cairo picking up the win by a countout. I'm going to give this one a 2. Much like the first match, nothing special. Just a match on the card. Again, indicative of what we would see in independent wrestling. I believe it was in a college gym, but this is what you would see on the weekends promoted as just wrestling in your high school gymnasium, and they would have one star, which we'll see at the end of the show. This had a couple known names. I mean, Terry Funk's obviously a known name. Eddie Gilbert's a known name at the time. Other guys were known on the indie circuit. At the end, we'll talk about the other star on here that probably was the one that would have sold the tickets to this. But anywho, our next match, and this is the next two matches, we get into territory where we're going to cover some problematic people. We have the Rockin' Rebel versus Tony Stetson. And I said Hitman Tommy Cairo. I meant to say Iron Man Tommy Cairo. Hitman was Tony Stetson. Another early ECW mainstay that helped build the company, that doesn't really get what he deserves as far as the recognition for where they would take wrestling, where ECW would go. Those, to me, Cairo, Hotbody Stetson, Glenn Osborne, Rockin' Rebel even, although I hate to give him any kind of credit, were guys that helped it. Eddie Gilbert definitely was one there. But anyway, I digress. If you're not familiar, and I have to put a disclaimer when I talk about these guys, Rockin' Rebel pretty much is the ECW equivalent of Chris Benoit. He ended up killing himself and his wife, I want to say about 7-8 years ago now. So yeah, he's problematic to talk about. I hate talking about those guys favorably. I try to stay as objective as I possibly can. I never really liked the Rockin' Rebel character. I thought it was dated, even at the time. In 1993, I was 16, which, do the math, I'm an old man now. Rockin' Rebel was not speaking to 16-year-old me. Rockin' Rebel was, in 1993, where we're already into grunge and gangster rap taking over music, Rockin' Rebel was hair metal. He was Rat. He was Poison. Not to say that those are bad bands. Those are great bands. But he felt like something whose time already passed. And I know he was a bigger name. He was a name on the independent scene here. He was a guy that a lot of people really liked. He got a lot of the magazine coverage back in the day. Again, just like I said, he was problematic. This wasn't a good match at all by any stretch. Rockin' Rebel picks up the win with his feet on the ropes. I give this match a 1. It wasn't good. I've seen a lot better from both guys. Tony Stetson especially, I think he was a really good wrestler of the time period. Much like I said, him, Cairo, and Hotbody, 3 of the guys that I think helped to build ECW. This just wasn't a good match. And sometimes that happens. You can have bad matches with good wrestlers. And I guarantee you, if I were to watch even every Kazuchika Okada match, who's one of the great wrestlers of this generation, I would find stinkers in that bunch because everybody has it. Ric Flair has had them. Shawn Michaels has had them. Bret Hart has had stinkers. Every wrestler that you could think of has had stinkers. This was one of them. Now, coming from that, what was essentially the main event, another TV title tournament match, the other problematic character, Jimmy Superfly Snuka versus Larry Winters. And again, much like with Rockin' Rebel, I hate to talk favorably about Jimmy Snuka because it's pretty obvious he murdered somebody. We have here Eddie Gilbert introducing Jimmy Snuka as part of the new Hot Stuff Incorporated, which had been his stable in WCW, UWF, USWA, CWA. He always had that stable, kind of like Paulie Dangerously had the Dangerous Alliance and a couple different federations. Same thing with Eddie Gilbert. This was probably the best match of the night, and saying that, it's still not a great match. At this point, Jimmy Snuka was well past his prime and well past his effectiveness. I just made up a word. His effectiveness. I know he still sold to people that remembered him from their childhood. 10 years ago, he was one of the biggest stars in the Northeast. He still had that fan base, and that's what they banked on to sell tickets. Snuka picks up the win here. I'm giving the match a 2. Again, it wasn't a good match by any stretch of the means. Very much indicative for what you would pay a $5 ticket to see. And that was announced as a main event, but after we see them wrapping up the show, and Sal Balomo comes out to say he felt cheated by the count out earlier, so he wants to have a match right now. He wrestles a guy named Ernesto Benefica, which I totally forgot. This guy, I don't know if he became anything else or if he was anything else before this, other than just an enhancement guy. This is a quick match. Sal Balomo picks up a win in less than a minute. It's a 1. Just not good. And that's the main thing about the whole show. ECW was known to be innovative and game-changing. But this show itself, for being ECW, it's not ECW. This is Eastern Championship Wrestling. This is an indie show. They got a deal on local television, because this was only on Sports Channel Philadelphia at the time. It hadn't gone anywhere else. This is the equivalent of watching your local indie fed, and there's some now that are on local cable channels all over the world. And there was, all through the boom period of wrestling, you would see these pop up. This wasn't the first indie fed that showed up on TV in the Philadelphia area. And it probably wouldn't be the last. I know that later on CCW had local contracts. Anyway, that's the main thing I take from this. Is it a good show? No, not at all. Overall, I give the show a 1. No real reason to watch this unless two things. You're an ECW fan and you want to see how far they came from the beginning to get to where they would go. And the second would be, if you're if you're someone that wants to consume everything, go back to this and watch it as it progresses through the ECW. You will see, even in this run, because Eddie Gilbert's run as Booker is underrated. Yes, he was booking a lot of basically a glorified indie show, but he booked some good angles there. He booked some good matches. He elevated some people. Shane Douglas got elevated during this run. Tommy Dreamer was Tommy came after Paul came in, but he had the Sandman in there already. You had some guys that would build the next steps for ECW were already showing up. And for historical reasons, I'd say watch this. For enjoyment reasons, probably not a good show to watch. Anyway, that's my opinion on this. Again, thank you, Steve, for the recommendation. You've been a supporter of what I do here for a very long time. I appreciate you, man. I really do. You don't know how much it means to me that you continue to watch and continue to make suggestions on what you want to see. And if anyone else out there, if you're watching this, I don't care if you've watched every video I ever made or this is the first video I made. If you have a suggestion of something on Peacock, and I forgot to mention this in the beginning, the premise of the show is we review stuff that was formerly on the WWE Network, now known as Peacock, now on the Peacock channel. If you have a recommendation for something you'd like to see me review for this, let me know in the comments. Like I said, I don't care if you've watched one show or every show. Let me know what you think. I'm very open to recommendations. As you can see, this was recommended by our friend Steve. Steve, thank you again. Your support means a very lot to me. I don't say this enough on my videos, but the support, I'm a smaller channel. I'm not monetized. The thing that keeps me wanting to make videos is the positive reactions I get, the support I get from people like yourself. And I really appreciate it, man. I really like that you stuck with me all this time. Even after I took an 18-month absence, you still came back. So I really appreciate it. Thank you. That's the most I could say without totally blubbering here. So I'm going to wrap this up. If you could, hit the like button, share. Like I said, it's a small channel. I'd love to see it grow. I'd love to make this my living. It would be awesome. It's a dream. If not, if that never happens, that's cool too. It's a fun hobby. Like, comment, share, subscribe if you haven't. And if you made it all the way to the end, put Eastern in the comments, because this isn't ECW. It's Eastern Championship Wrestling. With all that being said, my name is George Coles, and this has been my review of ECW Season 1, Episode 1.